Welcome to Heal Through Humor, the podcast designed for you to learn about yourself and laugh along the way. In each episode, we'll explore the healing power of humor as I sit down with guests to talk about mental health, relationships, self-growth, and the ever-evolving world of social media. I'm your host, Talia Bombola. Let's get started. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Morgan, for joining me for an episode of Heal Through Humor. I have consumed a lot of your content, so I'm very excited to have you live in person and dive right into what I imagine will be a very interesting conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me. I also love your page, so it's great to finally connect with you. This will be fun.
Yes, so let's dive right into the good stuff. Tell us about yourself. For those of you who are listening that don't know Dr. Morgan, she talks a lot about, which is so needed, how to move towards secure attachment, and I will let you take it from here.
Yeah, so I came to this work basically through my own journey of lots of failed relationships. Like many of us who get into clinical psychology, I had my own childhood trauma that
Yep.
I went through. Um, Really, the turning point for me was I was in my doctoral program and I was in my second year. And unbeknownst to me, I started dating a narcissist. And I
Same.
was
Actually the
right?
same.
Okay,
Yep.
great. And
Same
I
timeline, same program. Yep.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. And I was with him for a year and a half. Um and I hit absolute rock bottom when
Yep.
we went through our breakup, and I won't go into details really, but I was like filing a police report, and
Mhm.
I was in my apartment in the lobby, and I just remember sitting there. I like couldn't stand. I was in so much emotional pain. Like I know I'm being dramatic, but that's how I
No,
felt.
I
Like
yeah,
couldn't stand. I'm on the floor. I'm talking to this police officer, and it just hit me. I cannot live my life this way.
gotta change.
If this is what a relationship is going to be, I never want one.
Yep.
So at that point, I committed myself to I will understand relationships, and I just dove into researching attachment theory, relationship dynamics, and I just sort of thought to myself, well, if I can't have a healthy relationship, at least I could just try to understand them and
Yeah.
learn about them. So
Yeah.
that's where it all started. And fast forward 10 years later, I've done so much of my own work, and I've had the privilege of helping over 400 women at this point go through a program that I developed that takes people to secure attachment no matter their
Mhm.
past. So it's the cliche, took lemons, made them into lemonade. I'm in an incredible relationship going on 2 years,
Yay.
and my life is just completely different now. So that's
Yeah,
the
that's
short version.
I at this point would say I am shocked, but honestly, with how many people I've like sat with, it's like that divinely aligned. I'm like, oh, this makes sense. Oh, this makes sense. I have a pretty much eerily similar timeline story. Everything. I remember walking into
Wow.
like the DV shelter to fill out a report and looking at that and same thing of like, this can't be. Like this is not
Yeah.
I don't want this to be what love is like. And I don't want to tell myself that it's like that anymore. It has to change, and it took a lot of courage and a few times to leave, but getting out of it was saved my life, and it was the best thing I've ever
Mhm.
done for myself, for my current family, for everything that I have been through after that. I don't think I would have either been alive for it or been able to enjoy it. I would have been that same shell of myself. I can relate to that emptiness and that pain of like that I'm not even a person anymore. Like I don't
Right.
know who I am. I would look in the mirror and be like, this isn't me. I don't even
Yeah.
know, and the longer I stayed, the more I think I lost touch of who I was, and that's why I'm
Yes.
so appreciative for previous me for getting out of it and having even a sliver of hope that anything I have today was possible, because that's what kept me hanging on, was, like, hope of what I could have it be rather than hope of what he was telling me it was.
Oh, so profound. I relate to so much of that. And yeah, as you know, part of experiencing abuse is that self abandonment and losing ourselves and getting so disconnected. And what's beautiful is those of us that commit to rebuilding ourselves and intentionally healing.
Yeah,
So it's stories like mine, like yours. I think it gives people hope.
absolutely.
It's like no matter what you've been through, you
Mhm,
absolutely can heal. So
mhm.
I love
Yeah,
that.
It's nice to have that now, like, in retrospect. I think going through it was awful. If I could have the same, wisdom without having to have gone through that, maybe I would have picked that path, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But sitting across from clients and getting to help other people in, like, a coaching or therapeutic capacity and knowing that they're not alone, that look of when they look up and they're like, "Wait, you too?" And I'm like, "Absolutely. This chair was not
Yeah.
designed for me by accident. I had childhood stuff. I had adolescent experiences and early college and grad school. We don't stop living. We're not therapists by accident. I think we
Yes.
choose this profession. It chooses us like a sorting hat in Harry Potter, and then
Mhm.
we choose it back. But it's like, no, I really wanted to be in Slytherin, and it's this. And then it's like Gryffindor. And then it's like, okay, well, I guess I am in Gryffindor, and here I'm to do
Totally.
this job. Yeah.
I saw that meme you had on your page of,
Yeah.
like, the
The
play
sorting hat.
set. It's like the play set of, like, the therapist
Oh,
play
yeah. Yeah.
set.
The little therapist play set.
It's like
Yeah.
the couch and the chair, like, that was me. I was
Yep.
literally 6 years old on the
Yeah.
playground giving
How
free
does it make you
therapy to my
feel? Yeah,
friends.
same. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Heavily was the therapist friend, and then I'm like, "Oh, this adds up."
and then at some point you realize, "Oh shit, I'm taking care of everyone else because 'cause I'm
Mhm.
avoiding my
Yeah.
own healing."
Yes.
And then you have to do your own healing while also helping others, and I think
Mhm.
that's where we can really grow as professionals and really help people when we take ownership of our own healing. But
Yes,
yeah.
being able to have a support system. I've been in therapy for a long time, on and off, obviously
Yeah.
various reasons. Life events happen and change as you get older. I'm so appreciative for that support, for the business mentorship, for family, for
Yes.
my own coaches for fitness and everything else, and like nutrition, having like the full support system of people being there. So it's not me doing it all and then me doing everything for everyone. That was a necessary shift because I was actually joking about this on, like, the last episode, the book, The Giving Tree. It was,
Yeah.
like, my mom's favorite book growing up, and I remember having to confront her later of, like, "What is this shit? This was, like, a recipe of how to be codependent,
How to
and
be codependent, yeah.
the last page of the book is after she's given all of this, and the tree was happy." I was like, "The tree was happy? That is bullshit. No, like, that is you talk no, because most people in the world are not the tree in The Giving Tree, they're the boy. I'm not saying anything
Yes.
bad against men, but it's like the person who takes and takes and takes
Yeah.
is the higher likelihood than this martyr-like complex of the person who is giving and giving, and that golden rule is great, but nobody follows it to a T, so that leads to resentment.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my
Oh, yeah.
gosh. We could go
Such
down a whole rabbit hole
oh my
about
god.
that, and yeah, the
Yeah.
culture of codependency and how normalized it
Mhm.
is. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. So how do you think or how do you see a difference between the codependent tendencies and then true anxious attachment? It's something I've spoken about, but I always get different feedback, so I would love to hear yours.
That's a great question. So I think in anxious attachment, right, we are prioritizing the relationship and maintaining the relationship, maintaining the connection above
Mhm.
our own needs.
Right.
And I think that's very easy to fall into a codependent trap
Definitely.
in that way. Um, but I also think that you can be the taker and fall into a codependent trap as well. But
Mhm.
but I think anxious attachment makes you very vulnerable for codependent relationships to feel safe to you
Mm,
because you're
mhm.
getting consistent reassurance again and again and again, and you're with that person, so then you're not having to navigate developing secure attachment while being an individual.
Right.
But then eventually, just as you were talking about earlier, that
Mhm.
resentment builds,
Mhm.
and even the anxiously attached person feels suffocated and wants out.
Yes, the pull the ripcord. And
Yeah.
this is too much and not enough all at the same time, which is how I felt for many years, so I'm gonna go. Another person, if they're secure, is like, "What is happening? I no, we're fine. Like, you don't need to leave. We'll get through this." You're like, "Oh, cool. Yeah, let's talk it out, I guess." So it's if you don't self-abandon, even though that urge is still there, and that's what I've worked with a lot of my clients on, the urges will still come up. Even if your anxious
Yes.
attachment is in remission, as I like to call it, or we have it as highly managed as possible, it's gonna flare up. It's going to come up because it's not about your partner so much as it is about your perception of what's
Mhm.
happening in front of you, which could include your partner or could include a projection that you're putting onto them, whether you know it or not. Obviously, it's mostly subconscious, but when you become more aware of when you're likely to project, then your partner can also catch you. That's what a lot of the couples work I do. The couple will be like, "I don't think this is about me. I'm here for you, but that what you're doing is not a me thing. I'm gonna support you through it, but this is not about our relationship." This sounds a lot like a mom thing, a dad thing, and it takes a while to get to that comfort level, but a lot of the people that I work with are like, "Thank you, because that's helped stop a lot of our fights," is being
Mm.
able to lovingly share, "I know this isn't about me, and I'm not gonna leave you to figure it out for yourself."
So good. Yeah, and I love that shift when you start to realize, "Oh, we can have things that we're different on, we can go
Mhm,
through conflicts,
mhm,
we can get needs met in other ways that don't include each
mhm.
other,
Yeah.
and we can still have a great relationship." Like that
Mhm,
whole shift to two separate people who come together to co-create secure
mhm.
attachment and create a great relationship,
Yeah.
um, but they still have their individual selves. I put out this quote like years ago and I said, "It's like you want a partner who's your favorite country to visit, but they are not your
Mhm.
whole world."
Yes, that's a
Like,
really good
right?
quote. Yeah,
Like codependency becomes your whole world and then it
yeah.
becomes suffocating. But if it's like, "Oh, it's like my favorite country to visit, I know it's there, it's
Mhm,
reliable."
mhm.
There's a whole other world. And I think the best secure relationships make us feel more free.
Yes,
They
to go
empower
explore.
us. Yeah.
Yes,
We get to go explore and we become more of who we are
yes,
instead of chameleons
and then
and
being less, yeah,
and
absolutely.
prisoners.
Oh, yes. Yeah, one of my favorite books from I don't know if, not every grad program does, like, a psychodynamic or psychoanalytic lens. The one of my favorite books for my, like, post-grad training was The Drama of the Gifted Child by Alice Miller.
Mm,
The
mhm.
original title was The Prison of Childhood. No wonder it didn't sell well. She's like,
Yeah.
"I don't know." I'm like, "Well, if I had to talk to Alice, I'd be like, maybe the title's a bit off-putting,
Yeah.
accurate, but too painful that the person's like, 'Oh, I don't need to I already know what that
Yeah.
felt like.'"
Close that door.
Yeah, and never mind, thank
Yeah.
you. It's knowing that from the secure base and the secure place, you can, like you're saying, be more of yourself. You don't have to mute yourself or be less. And in a codependent or anxiously attached, or really any relationship where I like to call it's like lopsided,
Right.
that this you're like pedestalizing this person, and we're
Yep.
like, well, I'll just be here whenever you need me. We really can't tolerate that individuation. So those moments of connection, it's like, oh, I want to be fully
Yes.
engulfed. This is so great. Wait, you're gonna leave for work? Tantrum, protest. You can't leave.
Yes.
You can't this. You will be punished. You're gonna know why this is so I'm gonna make you feel how I feel. And then they leave and we course correct sometimes to being hyper independent, hyper
Yes.
avoidant, or we sit in pain, usually one of the two. And then the person comes back. And even from infant studies, we see that the child can't calm themselves down, even if the primary attachment figure has re entered the room,
Yep.
usually for quite some time. That does translate to what it's like for us in adulthood. And I wish this is our mission in life. It sounds like more people knew about this.
Yeah, I love
It's
talking
so
to other experts because
impactful.
it's like,
Yes.
yes, this is the rabbit hole we get to go
Yes,
down.
exactly.
It's
Yes,
so
that's how
good.
it is.
It's so good. And I think really learning attachment theory is one thing. And I don't know if you relate to this, but I had a season where I knew it all in an
Mhm.
intellectual
Of
way,
course.
but then to actually
Live it.
embody it emotionally, to
Yep.
embody secure attachment and actually be able to show up securely attached, that's a
Mhm.
whole different
Yeah.
ballpark, right? So
Yes.
I'm grateful to say I now can embody it, but I had seasons where I just knew what it was, but I couldn't actually do it.
Yeah, it's like the first surgery after medical school, the see one, do one, teach one, and now obviously it's more than that.
Right,
I can
right.
attest to that. I've talked to many
Yeah.
doctors, but that's like the concept. And for the people who are already securely attached, I call them the lucky ones. My partner is. I'll look at him sometimes, and I'm like, really, no trauma, nothing. So I met his parents and his family, and I'm like, this makes sense. This does add up. And also, there should be a case study about all of you because you are so
Totally.
secure, so kind, no drama. No, obviously, there's like,
That
scuffles or whatever, but that's
that's
so
like my
different. Yeah.
partner
Yeah.
too, like totally secure family. He tells
Yeah.
this story about one time his mom put like soap in his water bottle and gave it to him, and
Mm.
that's like one of the trauma things, and she like did it on accident. I'm like, okay, honey, like this is
I
not really
I wish
trauma.
I wish that was my problem. Oh, it's yeah, but I think one of my growth edges, the learning to or like, yeah, earning the secure attachment was still being empathetic, and obviously that's
Yes.
a different that's for anybody listening to this, it's much different when you are yourself in your own life, and then when you
Yeah,
are your therapist role, the
of
empathy and
course.
the intonation and the leaning in are much different. We can't be on like that all the time.
Yep.
That is what, like, anxious attachment, rampant codependency, even from childhood looks like being the therapist friend, you have to learn to bifurcate the 2 parts of you, being
Yes.
able to still be empathetic if they are feeling like, "Wow, this is a really big deal," and us being like, "I've been through so much worse than that, oh my gosh."
Yeah.
Still leaning in, like, "That does suck, that is really difficult, I'm sorry you had a hard day, I'm sorry you this,"
Yep.
rather than that avoidant or that callous cutoff of, like, "You think you had it bad, but" and then we find ourselves imitating our parents of, like, and then, "Oh, oh no."
Yes,
That just
totally.
we don't wanna hear that come out of our mouth.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I think something that gets overlooked when thinking about secure attachment is learning how to tune in to our partners, because I think in the beginning healing work, we're
yeah,
almost kind of having to course correct, and we're having to
yes.
like really tune into ourselves for the first time ever.
Mhm.
But we don't want to totally like swing to this side of I'm only tuned into me.
Correct.
So a lot of people that I coach for a long period of time, it's like, okay, you built that relationship with yourself. And now let's also remember we have to be curious about our
Yes,
partners. We have to tune into them.
yes,
And the growth is how do I tune into me and tune into them and maintain both, right?
yes, yes, 100%, and I mean, obviously it's a trending trait, but we could go down that rabbit hole too, like and then this isn't self-psychology, truly, every single human being has narcissistic traits, it's the
Right.
amount they're integrated, to what degree,
Yes.
if they are integrated, and being selfish or self-centered to an extreme degree obviously creates some friction, but that's a normal thing. But we've demonized it in society to put
Yep.
oneself first because we all would love it if we were operating on always do everything for other people. A lot of extremes, a lot of giving, a lot of martyrdom that sets us up for being very disappointed and resentful when we shift away from it's never about me and always about the other person to it can be
Right.
about both of us. There is that egocentrism that I don't think we ever really grow out of. Like we just kind of shift in and out of it, that it matters more to us, especially if our partner is securely attached. It can be
Yes.
easy to not tune in because they,
Yes.
for the most part, genuinely are like on the up and up, can deal with frustrations differently. Like if they're very mentally healthy, we can often neglect tuning into them or thinking that they could have a bad day or a bad time. This just
Yep.
happened over the weekend for me. And then I took some time to think about it and I was like, yeah, I totally blanked on that because for so long you have been the secure rock, this, that. We're going through career shifts, and this makes sense why I was leaning into you,
Mhm.
expecting very secure you, which you always are, and you were just having a rough weekend, and I was having a rough weekend, and we just didn't click, and I didn't blow it up. Old me would have been like, "I'm leaving. I want a divorce. I want to freaking out." And I'm like, "And we're good. We
And
will
we're good.
just float,
Yeah.
and I can just text you and let you know I see you. Thank you for working very hard for us, and we will get through
Yes.
this like we always do." And then it nips it in the bud, so it's not lasting. I'm sure you've had that
Mhm.
with previous people when you were very anxious, 2 to 3 weeks and the silent treatment and the this and the that, and just
Oh
like,
my god, the
oh,
drama.
the drama. Oh, I was addicted to the drama. Yes.
Yes. I
Yes.
know we can both relate to that probably of being addicted to the drama, being addicted to the chaos, and you're probably like me, you've like nerded out on intermittent reinforcement
Yeah.
and how
Oh,
that
yes.
relates to addiction.
Oh, yes. I'm quite the behavioral scientist when it comes to that. And all my students each semester when I teach it, they're like, "Wait,
Yeah.
oh, god," and I'm like,
You're like,
"Yeah."
"That's
So,
why.
that's
That's
why.
why."
That intermittent positive reinforcement is the strongest reinforcement schedule for behavioral conditioning, and that
Yep.
is what we do to people all the time. It is behavioral conditioning. You do this, I like it, I get praise, I do it again. Like, if we look at I look
Yeah.
at things far more from like evolutionary biological psychology. It's not everybody's favorite because I like to nerd out on it, but it's like it's true. Yeah, it might not honor the emotions and how the world should be all the time, but it tells you what it is like. And the
Mhm.
reality of it is anybody can be trained based on that, especially
Mhm.
if you are, yeah, I wrote an article about this yesterday. Those dark triad personality traits are the most attractive in women when women are in their younger 20s, like younger to mid 20s,
Hmm.
kind of prior to that frontal lobe development, but we still have those dreams and ideals and feel societal pressure of I got to be in a relationship. I got
Yeah.
to figure out something. We find those traits more attractive. Now, some new research is showing they're not as attractive, but you look at somebody, it's like, I have standards unless they're hot or rich. I want all of these
Yes.
things, but there he's so hot. That doesn't give him right to treat you like shit. But he has an 8 pack. It's like, that's okay, but he's not there for
Right.
you. He gives you the intermittent positive reinforcement. He never texts you back. It doesn't matter how hot he is if you never get to see him, does it? Hey there, listeners. Are you tired of settling for less than you deserve in your relationships? Do you ever feel like you're not being seen, heard, or valued the way that you want? Or maybe you've been wondering why you keep attracting the same kinds of people into your life, or why certain patterns seem to repeat themselves in your relationships. The answer might be deeper than you think, and you can find it in my new course. Rewire Your Relationships is a transformative course designed to help you stop settling for less than you deserve and start embodying your most confident, assertive, and authentic self in your relationships. You'll explore how your early experiences and parental influences have shaped your views on love, dating, and self worth. This isn't just about tips and tricks for dating, it's about understanding the core beliefs that drive relationships that you attract. You'll learn how to break free from those old patterns and start creating the kind of connections that truly reflect who you are. Imagine stepping into a relationship with clarity and confidence, knowing you're attracting people who value and respect you for who you really are, your deeply authentic self. The Rewire Your Relationship course gives you the tools to rewrite your relationship story, one where you're no longer settling, but thriving. Visit taliabombola.com/rewire your relationships or check the link in the show notes for more.
That's fascinating thinking about different developmental stages and being more vulnerable at certain
Oh,
stages of development.
absolutely.
That definitely lines up for me.
Yes, and that research rings true. There was a 2014 and then a 2017 and a 2020 study, I think was, or 2019. But they were recent. They were recent enough to still be like accurate, I would say, across each of those. It was consistently the older age groups, like 45 and up, who were kind of sick of the shit behavior, and that's
Yeah.
why I often see that, and we see that a lot on social media as well, these later life divorces or separations and reclamations of self. I liked the bad boy. I married the bad boy with the motorcycle, the this, the that, on the hopes that he would one day be there for me, and then 20 years later, that shit never happened. And
Mhm.
I've been parenting alone for the last 20 years. And lo and behold, some of them, if I've seen them clinically, some of them actually would be diagnosed as a narcissist.
Right.
Some really just never grew out or integrated those self centered traits, or they felt pressured to be a family man much sooner, a family person much sooner than they had
Than they
wanted
were ready
to.
for. Yeah.
And we get frustrated. It's like, but you wanted this. I didn't want to have kids. You wanted to have kids, and I didn't want to lose you. And my parents were pressuring me, so we did it. But like, I never wanted any of this. Very painful to hear, very necessary to hear.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
fascinating to think about that. And I think one of the things I've thought about, I wonder if you have too, is when I was going through my 20s, I would say that culturally we were still kind of like shaming therapy. There was
Oh,
no Instagram. Well, there was,
no.
but it was like you posted like selfies of
X Pro 2
yourself.
filters. Yeah, of like
Yeah.
your dinner at Cheesecake
Yes,
Factory.
you were
Yeah, it
posting
was.
your dinner. Like, there was no, like, helpful
No.
information out there, and I
No.
honestly experienced a ton of shame for the relationships that I was in, and it got to the point where I wouldn't even tell people I was dating because I knew it was gonna end in a breakup.
Yep.
So, didn't tell my friends, wouldn't tell my family members. I just
Mhm.
be in these relationships for months at a time and not tell anyone because I had so much shame about it.
Yeah.
But now we have this beautiful tool that is wonderful most of the time, I would say, depending on how you're using it, right? And
True.
there's
Yes.
all this information out there on social media,
Yeah.
and part of me thinks, well, I guess I'm optimistic that that's actually going to help people make better relationship decisions earlier on in their
Yes.
lives.
Yes. I 100% agree. I've definitely thought about that, and I work with a lot of teens. I've seen them this analysis or like dynamic work can be lifelong, whether it's every week, that's an aside, but I want to be there for them during their seasons of life. And I've seen many teens starting like 12 to 13 to fast forward however many years old they are now, but their brain was essentially raised on secure attachment. Even if their family system wasn't, I would give them attached. I would give them these books. And sometimes the parents would
Yeah.
push back. And because it's analysis, I'm like, I think you're having your own reaction because some part of you is envious that you didn't receive this. And if you had, perhaps you wouldn't have ended up with the spouse that you did. Like, I'll just cut it to them straight. They're like, oh, and I'm like, and that's okay. And we're going to work with that. You need to go to your own therapy for that. I'm working with your teen. And if we're doing family sessions, this is still going to help your teen relate to the family more if they don't feel anxious towards you. Like this heals so much. And it's not as much about blaming parents for where they missed you in childhood. It's appreciating where they did
Mhm.
meet you, if at all, and then learning that no one person, as much as it's even biologically designed to be that way, no one person can meet another person's needs entirely. And if they are able to do that with 100% consistency, there will be self abandonment going on because
Mhm.
it's just not the way the world or the human body is able to work. We need to take a
Mhm.
break from this to go to the restroom, to eat, to this. We aren't fully self
Mhm.
functioning beings.
Mhm. I love that. I love that idea of a more educated group of people, and I think that it's really empowering. Like, I found attached when I was 24 and I had already
Yeah.
been through
Yep. I was
really
just
shitty
reading basically a diary
relationships.
and I'm like, well, this would have been fucking helpful to know earlier. Oh, there
Yeah.
it is. Oh, a protest behavior must be okay. Well, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yep.
having those resources now, I think is really empowering. I
Changer.
do think though that there is that element, like I was saying earlier, where we intellectualize and it's a whole other thing to actually
Very true.
emotionally internalize a secure attachment. So
Yes. Yes.
even
That's
if
where I
we
think
know something,
it
it's
doesn't mean we can do it.
it's not
Yeah.
gonna translate always. Yep.
Yeah. The work it sounds like that your, program and my program do is being able to provide a supportive container and a surface to practice against or to kind of relate to in a way, so it doesn't
Mhm.
exist in a vacuum because I think where, like, the line of how helpful social media and self-help books can be almost stops at, well, this isn't going to materialize into a person that I can practice with. How do I deal with the emotions once I'm activated, once I'm triggered, once that switch is flipped on
Yes.
of, oh, I'm trying to attach. Old you is going to come crawling out of the woodworks of like, I'm sorry, we didn't authorize this. He held the door for you. This is far too stable. We're going to need you to blow it up.
Oh my
Go
god.
for the blow up. Thank you very much. Like,
Totally.
it's not what we think it is when we're reading the books. It's great in a vacuum, but then you get the courage and bravery to practice those skills and the person doesn't text you back and you're like, I did what the book said. Like,
Yeah.
this isn't fair. Or I'm sad. I'm angry. I'm sad. I feel left out. I feel having somebody to help process those painful emotions gets you through to the other side to really being secure. I don't know if you felt like that along the way with any mentors that you had or therapists, but that's really what helped me out was knowing I'm like, and you legally can abandon me. So I will see you next week. Thank you very much.
Yeah, definitely a lot of mentors in my life, including, I think coaching and
Yep.
therapy,
Yep.
um, and really intentionally releasing old belief systems. I'm a big fan of NLP,
Yes.
and rewiring our brain. Um, and then what I've realized in my own work of serving clients is just what you said, that I used to have like an 8-week container,
Mhm.
and I started to realize, oh, we need to offer options to stay
Yeah.
with us longer,
Yeah.
because there's radical transformation that happens in 8 weeks, but it is like what happens when you're out in the dating world.
Yeah.
So we actually have added like a membership option to our program where
Nice.
people like stay. And I
Yes.
and I love those relationships, and I love getting to see them have their
Yep.
corrective emotional experiences,
Yes.
right?
I love them. Yeah.
Yeah.
The membership
And
part's sweet.
and they have that with us, right? Like we
Yes.
also I'm a big fan of like the psychoanalytic work too. That was what my orientation was. So yeah, getting to be that secure object for our clients too
Mhm.
and
It's
having them
huge
experience it. Yeah.
for them to be able to relate to it in a way, and then much like when we talk about that in like analytic classes, it's like they can internalize that
Yes.
object, and that's that base, and changing their beliefs to have more of that inner cheerleader voice rather
Yes.
than that inner critic. So like that super ego is actually kind rather than being very demanding and critical. That
Yep.
helps them to shift away. That yes, it's so much of it is rewiring the beliefs. It's internalizing healthier and more secure objects, and almost learning to externalize and reframe any of the unhealthy objects that we're currently relating to, and having that mindset shift does require more. I've done the, like, shorter containers too, and I'm like, "This isn't enough." And not
Yeah.
in the, like, anxious, "I'm not giving enough, I need my program to be so robust." It's not like the anxious attachment in business that I'll talk about. It's more about this really that needs to be longer, because this is
Mhm.
almost going to be, like, too much of a teaser and too activating, and
Mhm.
knowing those longer lengths, or the, like, 6 months or a year, or they can stay for as long as they want and chat with, like, the community space.
Yes.
That's where I think a lot of programs are moving towards, because we're redefining what connection is like. Before it was all in person, then social media came
Yeah.
around, then COVID hit, and then it was, like, all externalized to social media. Now we're, like, having social atrophy, but trying our best to come back and coalesce together,
Yeah.
so we're building that sense of community, I think, we had prior to social media,
Yep.
again, but on social media in a healthier way that's connection based, not isolation based.
So good. Yeah. I agree. I agree. And I think being able to create those communities, I think you and I can relate. Like we basically made what it was that we needed. Like
Oh,
if my program would have been available in my early 20s, hello, like my
yeah.
my
I'll
dating
just
life would have been way different.
I will leave my facial expression to say it all. It would be a yeah, complete game changer. I would be a different person. Who knows?
Yeah.
This is what I always like to think, or not always, but I often think about, I will say, if we met a certain because this quote gets floated around, right person, wrong time, wrong person, right. There's so much that goes into it. We also are a person in that equation. We can't always
Mhm.
externalize it to, well, they were the right person. That's subjective, because I'm sure there's somebody now with any of my exes who are like, they're amazing. And I'm like, just you
Yes.
wait. Just you wait. Mm-mm. The mask will come off eventually. It's all subjective to where we are at and what we need in the moment, and
Totally.
that's where rewiring those beliefs and those needs
Yes.
is. If I couldn't have it for me, at least I can give it to another person in a healthy way, not in a
Mhm.
codependent martyr-like way, because it is a transaction. Obviously, there's a coaching agreement, there's boundaries, there's something set up where they're
Yes.
seeking it out and they're consenting to, I would like my life to be different, rather than, I think a lot of people who are the therapist friends, they're choosing on the other person's behalf. Don't you see how much your life could be different? It could be so
Mhm.
much. And that feels almost intrusive in a way, to have somebody
Totally.
convince you or try and convince you out of a bad relationship. I'm going to cling to that shit for dear life. If
Totally.
I'm going to leave, it's going to be on my own volition after trying many times. And maybe I could have listened to you beforehand. Okay. Well, there it is.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, I feel like there's so many things that we can talk about. There's just like there's so much in common. But one of the quotes I heard recently, and I feel like this might resonate with you, but it's this idea that only through spiritual pain can we
Mm.
have spiritual gifts.
Mm.
So
I like that.
it's like one of the ways that I've kind of reframed my experience, and I think like going through the depths of relational trauma and that absolute fear of abandonment
Mhm.
and a disorganized attachment style and all of it has led me to this place where I get to serve and I get to contribute to the world.
Mhm.
And there's something really beautiful about that being where I am now.
Yeah.
It's not like, being in the depths of it, obviously it's a nightmare, but I think just realizing I guess it's that cliche, like it all happens for a reason. I feel connected to that wow, I get to really
Yep.
make an impact and really contribute to people and be a light,
Yes.
and show people what's possible.
Yes. It's a way, as you were speaking, I was making a connection. Being able to No, it's almost like that omniscience that we really do desire from our partner. I wanna be known in a way that no one else knows me, especially if I don't have to ask, and that does largely relate to, like, a childhood infant desire
Right.
from that the primary maternal preoccupation,
Mhm.
that in a relationship, in a therapeutic relationship or a coaching relationship, like a non-romantic relationship, having gone through to those pits or to those heights, whatever it might be spiritually and internally in our own relationship with ourselves, we can know without the client or whomever it might be having to say
Yes.
it or give detail because we've most of the time healthily internalized what is ours. We have space for what is theirs, and we can meet somewhere in the middle of I know what that's like. Or as you're sharing in the
Yes.
beginning, your experience, I went back to my head with
Right.
the partnership that I had and what that was like for me. I didn't date your narcissist. I dated my narcissist and I know what that was like to separate and
Yep.
I can meet you kind of
Mhm.
halfway or I can meet you in that in between space where we both had a very similar experience and that is the beauty of how social media can bring people together and give them some content or give them words for an experience they might not have ever felt brave enough or safe enough or okay
Mhm.
enough to share. And then what's next? How do we continue to help them? And the containers that I think you and I both hold is exactly how.
Yeah, so, so good. I'm grateful. I'm grateful that, I know this kind of sounds like I'm tooting my own horn, but like I'm just grateful that this exists now because I think
Yes.
about that younger version of me that really needed this. So,
Mm-hmm.
I'm grateful that there's people like you and I that are doing this work.
Yes, we've lived it, we get it, and reminds it never it never fails to amuse me. It reminds me of, like, teenagers who are, like, telling their parents, like, "You never understand" the dramatics. Oh, the I love the drama and you no, you're right. I've never dated anybody in my whole life. I've never had a test not go the way you're right. I have a no life experience. It's just so weird. I just woke up one day and had a baby. Like, it's
Yeah.
just that lack and that ego of, like, this the worst pain of my life, me, very egocentric till the frontal lobe develops in the mid-20s, and then you get older, you're like, wow, I was really being dramatic. It wasn't the worst thing in the world. I went on to live through much worse. I wish I had 14-year-old me's problems. And it's the way with the clients, like, you wouldn't get it, you wouldn't this. And that's usually where I'll be like, would you like to tell me? I can tell you a story if you want. And they're like, whatever. And then I'll say it, and they're just like, oh. I'm like, "So I do get it, and then we can continue the work." They're like, "Okay, I trust you more now." But that's all we really wanna
Yeah.
know is that we're not alone and that the person who's sitting in front of us or is like our Sherpa or our guide is
Yes.
not just somebody who's educated themselves solely on Instagram posts or self-help books. You have to have the lived experience and the clinical training or the professional training and
Yes.
the know-how of whatever the common trends are. All of that blended up makes somebody a ethical and a sound provider in my belief.
Oh man, this could be a whole other hour on this topic, but because I do think about, gosh, there's so many coaches out there, and obviously, I'm a psychologist
Mhm.
and I am a
Yes,
coach.
yes.
However, that clinical training of knowing how to sit with people and the thousands of hours that went
Oh,
into
yes. So many
me,
thousands.
yeah,
Yeah.
developing that, and the coursework and the licensure, I mean, I know I don't have to tell you, you
Mhm.
know, but there's these people that are calling themselves relationship coaches, and they don't know how to actually
Mhm.
sit with people, um, and it bothers me.
Oh, yes. I have dedicated my own some of my own mentor hours to processing the anger, the frustration. I've gotten out my notes app and written the Declaration of Independence on why that is so frustrating, and it's not I sat with it long enough to know that it wasn't entirely an ego thing. It wasn't I
Yeah.
never the thought really actually even if I go back in my notes, it never crossed my mind of like, "Well, that's not fair that they get to and I don't." It wasn't that. It's I imagine being the person in pain,
Yes.
seeking out those
Exactly.
resources because I was that person looking on blogs and Reddit wasn't really a thing back then to my knowledge. Like I think it was like girl.com, like all of these other blogs of like, how am I supposed to do this? And I didn't really want my parents' marriage entirely, nor was that like an appropriate thing to ask. So there were so many things where I would turn to the internet, or I would turn to a group of girlfriends at school or the older girls that I could find along the years. It
Mhm.
turned into social media. I I'm an Enneagram 8. I have an innate sense of justice. Like, I have all those things that check me off to be, like, very driven towards that's not fair and that's not right. And for those of us who did dedicate so many thousands of hours and go through the clinical training,
Yeah.
we know what it's like to sit with a person. We also know what it's like when somebody comes in and is in true pain and they just want the escape, they want the quick fix. "Please get me out of this." I can't do that in a session. And there are
Mhm.
sometimes not, sometimes yes, well-meaning coaches who see that and go, "Let me fix it, let me this, let me that." That's like this new broken off piece of codependency of like, well, if I
Mhm.
can't go through the clinical training to be a therapist, I'll just call myself a coach and hope for the best. And the intent is, I'm sure, fine. But then when you look at like high ticket charging trauma coaching, which is not a thing, by the way, anybody listening, let me spend $20,000 on my container and I will heal you of all of your traumas. I'm like, we have fallen so far as a society. Like we overshot our mark when it came to how helpful social media can be. Oof, yeah. Mm,
Yeah, it's a whole thing, but I
yeah.
think, I think anyone listening really being able to choose
Yes.
your healing journey, like choose it
Yeah.
intentionally, do your research, look for people who have training, and I think
Yes.
it is helpful to look for people who maybe share some lived experience,
Of course.
who you connect with, who you relate to,
Mhm.
and it's your journey. You get to be intentional. So,
Yes. Yes, and
but
knowing I like to add, like, the lived experience in and of itself is not what would qualify or constitute somebody to be a coach or
yes.
a therapist. It has to be
Yes.
multiple factors because the more life you live, the further away you get from whatever lived experiences that you can
Yes.
share. So you really do want to have other tools at your availability. Like, I used to only see teenagers years ago, and still love working with teens, but they're getting older. I'm getting older. The things that I could relate to in some ways will still exist: social isolation, bully, like that. It just looks
Sure.
different with a different name. But there are so many other things that you're not caught up on because the lived experience in and of itself, the more you live, the more experience you have underneath it. So you get further away from being relatable for that alone.
Totally.
Have the other things and have the training and have a support system. And if you're picking somebody to mentor you, I do recommend following their social media for a while. What other content do they have? Listening to their podcast,
Yep.
reading books, or anything like that, which I know you have one coming out. I would love to
Yes.
hear more about that. And please plug away. I love that you wrote a book.
I love this style of conversation. We are like so similar, just like the flowing, and we just
Yes,
see where it goes. But thank you for remembering. Yes, I do have
of
a book
course.
coming out. It's called Love Magnet. So I'm just gonna show it right here.
Gorgeous.
Thank
Acclaimed.
you. The subtitle is Get Off the Dating Roller Coaster and Attract the Love You Deserve, because that was very much my experience, the dating roller coaster.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and what I like about this book, just to plug myself, is
Yeah.
it is not just like a passive read. It's very experiential. There's a lot of exercises. You will do work when you read this book, and it really has capacity to help you make a big shift. So I was like, if I'm going to have people sit down and read, I want them to get a ton of value out of it. Um, the other thing I'm excited about is attachment theory, but make it fun, which
Yes.
I know you can relate to. There's a
Oh,
lot
yeah.
of humor. There's
Yep.
a lot of like easy to understand attachment
Mhm.
theory pieces. So for anyone who is looking for a different experience in 2023, you're wanting to finally have a great relationship, I think it's a good place to start. And it's under 180 pages too. So short and sweet.
Good. We love that.
I
You
don't
can
like
now
fluff.
you
I am
can
like a no
yeah.
fluff person,
Yeah,
you know?
let's get right to
Yeah.
it, yeah. I can't say how many books I've read where I'm like, "Is this necessary?"
Like
Okay,
a whole chapter
yeah,
setting up the next chapter. Is that
yeah.
required, you know?
Probably not. Same thing with TV shows. I'm like, we could have totally cut out the first
Yes.
like, I've hired
I'm an
myself to be
8.
a
I'm an
producer.
8 as well.
Oh, yay! I knew I
So,
loved yay!
efficiency. I'm
Yes.
like, "Let's go. Let's get it done."
Streamline, efficient. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. I knew I liked you.
Yeah,
Yes, I can
right?
hear it.
Yes, we have so much in common. This has
Yes,
been so fun. I feel like it's like 10 minutes, but we've
I
talked
know.
for a while.
Yeah, we should do another episode if you want. I know, you're local to Southern California-ish, right?
So I have been all over the place.
I've seen you I'm like, "Where is
Where is
where
she?
in the
Yeah,
world is Dr. Morgan?"
that's what my clients joke. They're like, "Where are you?" Um, so I'm officially relocating to Bozeman, Montana.
Gorgeous.
Yeah,
Excellent choice.
but I go to San Diego quite a bit.
Okay.
So I love SoCal, so I'm sure we can connect.
That would be cool. I am also not opposed to going out to Montana.
Yeah,
The area is gorgeous. That would
come
be
see the
cool. Like a
mountains.
working girls retreat or something
Oh,
like
that sounds fun.
that. Cool. Yeah, well, we'll be in touch definitely. And where can people find you and your gorgeous book?
Thank you. So the best place is Instagram and it's Dr. Morgan Coaching. Also my podcast is a good spot and it's the Let's Get Vulnerable
I love it.
podcast.
It's a
Yes.
very good
Thank
podcast.
you. So sweet. Thank you so much for
Of
having me.
course. Thank you so much. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate your time.
Yes, thanks.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Heal Through Humor. If you like the show, can you please go on your favorite platform and like, rate, review, subscribe, all of the terms that we usually throw out? I would really appreciate it, and I would love to get more listeners just like you in front of the podcast. And if you have an idea for a guest, please feel free to DM me at Talia Bombola. I would love to hear from you. Until then, I will see you on the next episode. Take care.